Happy Wednesday. Welcome back to the Wolff Den presented by Win Again Academy. I'm Matt Wolff, founder of Ticket Time Machine. Today, we welcome Gus Sainz to the show. Welcome to the Den. How are you?
How's it going, Matt? Thank you very much for inviting me today.
So, you were one of the very few positive things that came out of my visit to Sopranos Con, was, which was many moons ago.
Absolutely.
There was a few. Matthew Brennan. I don't know if you know the guy who does Two Thangs, TWOTHANGS.
I think I've heard of him.
Yeah, great artist. I met him there too. I met another artist. The vendors. The vendors were great at that event. Anyway, that was that's
it was a very interesting chance encounter. I remember we were promoting The Prey those days. The movie hadn't been finalized yet, but we were kind of doing all the rounds of all the small conventions because being in the independent world, film production, you're your own marketing machine. So you have to kind of hit the pavement, talk about different things. And the funny thing is that I like to basically boast a little bit of your popularity for the audience. But I was talking to somebody before I left for the holidays around September. I was talking to this one producer who worked for ABC. And for some reason, your name came up. I said, "You mean Matt Wolff, Ticket Time Machine?" Yeah, that guy. So it seems like, you're basically known all around California. So that's pretty cool.
For the people who don't know who you are, let's give them a quick introduction, and then we'll go on and talk more about The Prey and everything else that you guys are working on right now.
Perfect. So basically, I'm an independent film producer, writer, and producer. I started a couple of early projects, years ago in the 2000s, and then I kind of stepped out of the industry. Then got back into it when I associated myself with Eric Hensman of Lennox Productions. He became the director of the movie The Prey. And then after a couple of years, probably 5 to 6 years between trying to secure funding and then kind of find the right distribution, we finally got the movie out there in June 21. So it was kind of one of those years that basically the movie was kind of ready by 19, but then the whole pandemic hit. There wasn't really anything going on, no theatrical, very little stuff going on. And the problem is that even though a lot of people said we could have took advantage of getting it onto the streamers, problem was that, first of all, most of the people that are making the decisions weren't taking any meetings because of COVID. Everybody's doing Zooms. But at the same time, we got a small offer from one of the streamers, and we figured it's very little money. And again, if you don't have big representation, if you're not part of the Hollywood culture, part of the Hollywood insiders table, you're not going to get a big payout. Also, our stars weren't that huge. I mean, we had Danny Trejo, we had Nick Chinlund, who has also had a little bit of resurgence. We had Kevin Grievous, who was the creator of all the Underworld series, but still they're kind of small for what these people want. And so we decided, let's just go ahead and try to carve our own way with some independent distribution. And then that kind of led to a small theatrical, then a very successful run on TVOD, and now it's available on Tubi. And because of that, I've created a good relationship with the people at Tubi, and I'm doing some smaller productions right now that are being filmed probably during this year. So that's going to be a little bit into the future. But yes, I just carving a little bit our way into this small niche of independent filmmaking.
Yeah, I mean, when we first met, you were there to promote and pitch The Prey. As you mentioned, it's got Danny Trejo and a couple of other actors that people would know. I mean, there's a lot of independent films out there with people you've never even heard of who are getting out there and getting produced and put on Netflix and Amazon. And there's a lot more streaming opportunities now than there was back then. So what is it that, you think about the independent films that makes it that much tougher? I mean, you are an independent film, but you have a film that's made with some known actors who've been in, Danny Trejo has been in some big movies.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's a very interesting thing because it's what we call the invisible wall. It's kind of like everybody who has a major representation through an agent or reputable manager is able to have access to the bigger production companies and get meetings with the studios, with bigger production companies, with Lionsgate, with Aperture, with all these big companies. But if you're not represented, you're kind of like outside of the wall. So basically, you have to try to come in and and scratch your way in. And also, it's kind of a small way of the managers and agents who really kind of run the show in Hollywood to kind of like pick and choose and become the gatekeepers. I even remember when Amazon started like 5, 6 years ago with their famous Amazon Studio, where oh, now independent filmmakers can submit and create projects and do this and do that. Right away, the big three agencies got a hold of the people at Amazon and started telling them, hey, listen, you're going to get yourself into this big trouble. There's a lot of people who don't know what they're doing, blah, blah, blah. Let us kind of help you filter. And before you know it, they signed up with these agencies. So now even that new venue for independence also got controlled by the agencies. And I do understand why they do this, because you got to remember that it is a very litigious society, and everybody you bump into has a story idea, or I have this great movie idea. So you got to remember that anytime where a movie's in production, there's probably 2 or 3 people sitting at a restaurant who have no idea that this movie is being produced, but kind of know about the story or have an idea that's similar. So again, most of these people are kind of having their guard ups because they don't want any type of legal trouble. So what we managed to do is that through my lawyer, Chumahan Bowen, who's a Native American, we set up this little sit up fee where basically he contacts on behalf of us all these production companies, and in the way it's a more legitimate way for them to kind of respond and don't feel that we're some nobody's
2
out
guys
there.
just trying to pitch something and sell it.
Exactly. It just basically you have to create some sort of level of legitimacy, and again, fear that you're not going to be litigious when they even look at the project. Here's the thing: a lot of movie ideas get stolen, and the funny thing is that there's nothing really much you can do. And the problem also is that once you register a script and once things are kind of in motion, people don't really steal or want to steal, because the problem is it takes a lot of time and money to make any type of project. Even a $50,000 independent movie, 100,000 is still money. And if you have a legitimate claim through the Writers Guild that that movie is registered similar to you, you can actually denounce them to the Writers Guild, and they can actually stop the release of the movie. So who would really want to get involved in that type of thing?
Big risk.
There's still shitty people, of course, but at the same time, I mean, people being afraid of losing their story idea, whatever, doesn't really happen that much.
Well, I thought I got all excited at the beginning stage of this because I thought that I had connected you with a company that was going to be able to take this film out there.
Yeah.
I thought they were reputable. They had previous projects that were very well known, I think award winning, that they were a part of, and it turned out not to be.
Well, that's the funny thing, Matt, is and I do love how much you try to help us in those days, because like I said, you did connect us with source of people and people who were really semi-legitimate in the industry, because what most of these companies do is they attach themselves as smaller partners onto bigger movies. So they really are truthful of saying that they're part of this big movie. Like, for example, this one friend of yours who supposedly funded a little bit of Black Swan,
Right.
which was a big movie and all that. But then once you start peeling the layers of these people, you start seeing what's really going on. And then interestingly, this person, this investor who really was kind of like a money guy, he kind of coined himself as a producer, but at the same time, people coming in with money do get producer credits and all that, which is very legitimate also. But he connected us to this one company who, interestingly and coincidentally, I had a project done like 5 or 6 years ago, and these were these total con people from England, and I said, oh my God, these are the people he's recommending us to. And it was really funny because the guy seemed very legit at the beginning, seemed very honest, very well.
Yeah, it felt good until it came time to get on.
No, the one thing that when me and Eric were kind of gave us a really, really huge red flag was we're talking 2019, 2020. So things are kind of there's a lot of modern technology. Things are going on. This guy was supposedly like an investor. He made his money through the furniture industry. Then got into the movies, which a lot of people do once they become independently wealthy. They like to play with film production, which is great. We need new money coming in. And the guy was worth so many millions, this and that, whatever. But we can never get him on the phone.
No,
His
it was
phone
a weird
broken.
situation.
And the funny thing is, come on, an iPhone is 400, 500, 600 bucks. You can get it for free at T-Mobile. Yeah. And you could never get it and basically do a face-to-face. So it seems very weird in so many ways,
Yeah, I actually watched the movie or documentary BitCon last night. Have you seen this?
Oh, really?
It's about these guys who used the crypto world and created this fake company, and they had literally a fake CEO where they wouldn't obviously you couldn't get on the phone with this person because he didn't exist. And
Of
it was
course.
just interesting the way that it was, that there are people who invest a lot of money, even though if you do a
Oh,
little bit of research, you could kind
it's
of find
amazing.
out right at the surface.
It's amazing when you hear all these stories of these very, very extremely successful and wealthy people dumping money into these crazy schemes. And then, like, when we go talk to investors, they ask us 50, maybe 1,000 questions. And we're talking about 100, 200, 300, 400, $500,000 movie, which, I mean, worst comes to worst. We all tell them from the beginning, it is very risky to invest in this and that. And they ask us 50,000 questions. And then you see these millionaires dropping 600, 500, a million, $300 into these crypto scams. And even though they seem to be doing some research, I mean, these people are paper thin in their profiles. So
Yeah.
it's just amazing. I guess it's just people basically who have a lot of money to play. And for them, it's like, it's
That's
spending $10, I don't know.
a lot of people with a lot of money to not worry about where it goes to.
And sometimes also they're trying to hide it. They got it the wrong way and they got to get rid of it pretty fast
Yeah,
too.
maybe they're trying to
So
launder the money or invest it or
yeah,
wash it,
exactly.
whatever you
So,
want to call it. So touching on what you just said, it is a risky proposition to invest in an independent film that's going to go out there. What what is the reward, and is that really a huge roadblock to being an independent film producer?
well, absolutely. You got to remember also that this is not a problem of the independent film. If you look at the last statistics of last year, Disney, which is one of the hugest, like the biggest, like, gorilla in the room, lost almost $1 billion on their 8 movies that they released. And you think about it, how can that be? It's Disney. Now,
Big budget.
the people did not like the stories, that maybe they didn't connect with the thing. Maybe they thought it was a little bit too, like, female centric. I mean, and this whole woke thing is a little bit ridiculous because people talk about this wokeness and this and that. The problem is that a lot of agendas are being pushed forward, and the people who are running the studios really don't know what they are doing. You got to remember that most of these studios now are being bought by multinationals. So it's basically this one guy that's basically been, like, running Coffee Beans, like, or CEO of Starbucks. They put him into a movie studio. I love movies. Oh yeah, I can. And he doesn't understand what makes a story great, what makes a person attached to a character, what makes us follow the plot. So what happens? You have all these agents and managers come in, start whispering into their ear, oh, hire this guy, hire this director, hire this lady. Oh, she's really hot right now. Oh no, yeah, she's worth 20 million, blah, blah, blah. And these guys just basically, okay, whatever. And they throw stuff out there because they have the money hose to kind of basically take care of the production. You make a movie, it's 100 million. How much you have to spend marketing? Oh, marketing says, like, 80 to 100 million. Okay, throw that out there. So it's risky no matter who gets into the business because it's basically based on personal tastes. But at the end of the day, there's great movies being made for $100,000 movie, $100,000 profit, and also there are great movies made for 100 million. The problem is that not all stories kind of connect. So yes, it's riskier when you're on the independent side because you're limited by your levels of distribution. But now I think the formula with AVOD, which is a really, really great tool for people who want to try to get into the business on the independent side. AVOD is it's called advertising video on demand. What we used to have as kid called television. Because basically now you watch a movie and you have ads in it. And right now, even the streamers are going back to that same model because there's nothing that's better. Disney lost millions of dollars. Paramount bumped in millions of dollars on their streaming thing, and it's not making sense because people, once their favorite show ends, they switch to another streamer. So basically, people are, and networks and all these production companies and streamers are going back to the advertising model. So going back to AVOD, which is the Freebies, the Pluto TVs, the Tubies, and all that, it's going to be a $9 billion industry in 2029 because at the same time, people may be like, they watch The Prey. Okay, what's a fun little B movie, this and that. But I mean, will people pay $5.99 to watch it? Maybe, maybe not. Will they watch it for free? Absolutely. And then what happens is that basically, like, we're getting constant revenue stream right now from Tubi, which is amazing. And you see some of these smaller productions. For example, there's a really big niche right now called the urban movie, which is kind of like, basically African American cast in kind of like, urban settings, crime drama, this or that. But it has a huge market. and there's all these small little thrillers and crime detective stuff in there, basically. So if you're smart enough and learn how to produce a production or a movie under $500,000, you will make your money back on the AVOD platforms. The thing is, again, you have to know exactly what to do, probably put in some names for recognizable talent, this and that. But yeah, it's always a risk to be in movies. And the downside is how you explain that to people who want to invest. So there's two types of people who usually get involved in the movie industry. People who just love the glamour, love the style, always wanted to try a little bit of it, but didn't really have the access. And now that they have the money, they can play a little bit of a Hollywood and producer. And then other people who just figure, hey, like let me expand my portfolio in high risk investments. And that's basically what it is. You got to remember that these studios, last year with the strikes of the writers and actors, they were being killed because they owe money to produce these movies. The only people that didn't want to budge was Amazon, Apple, and this other streaming company, I don't remember which, who are independently financed. They don't need money because they have their own. So they were going to hold straight until the whole thing ended. It was ended because the studios had a huge, I think, for example, I read this one article that Paramount owed $900 million on basically on a debt that basically the interest was due in mid-December. And they haven't released the movie in 5 months. That was crazy. So they were being strangled. So yeah, it's a really big situation of return on ROI. And again, and it's art. So it works and it doesn't work sometimes,
Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff that you just said. Partially on the cost of things, like, is it free to watch? And like, if I put something on Netflix, will I watch it because I'm already paying for Netflix? I think the average person isn't really tied or loyal to any streaming. We have a ton of them. We have Netflix and Amazon, and so I go through and see, hey, what movies are interesting, and then there's all these movies that you've never heard of that are on there that you might want to watch. So while it's not free to have, it could get a lot of eyeballs, and depending on how good it is, everyone's always sharing. I mean, what people are sharing movies and shows that they like more than anything else that they'll tell you what they like. A favorite restaurant, sure, right? But a movie and a show, everyone's always asking for what's a good movie you saw, what's a good show that you saw. So isn't there value to just getting something out there and getting a buzz if it's good? I mean, that's a bet, right? You're betting that you're going to get the buzz on it, and not. It's almost like a teaser for the bigger, like an appetizer for like the bigger entree that you have coming down the pipeline. That once they see some success, they're going to want to be a part of this next thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the exposure that's one of the things that it's not really quantifiable unless you're in the industry. Like for an investor, they're just coming in there for a little bit of fun and see what basically what's the return or what money they can get out of it. But for us producers and creators, it's a huge boost because actually it gives us a lot of exposure. You have no idea how many meetings and how many places the Prey has legitimized me as a writer producer because the movie's out there, it has talent, it has been distributed, and they see a certain quality of level that sometimes are not available in really like micro independent movies, like which is our category. So the thing about it is that oh yeah, it's really great when it comes to exposure, and also at the end of the day, exposes you to the bigger guys and the bigger studios and the bigger production companies and say, oh, look, this guy, look what he did with this little. Maybe if we give him a little bit more, he can do something great. So yeah, of course, the exposure is always really great. And again, starts building on your platform and your repertoire of creativity, because now you're not just a guy basically knocking a door with, hey, can you produce my script? No, the movie's out there. Oh, this guy really did something. He knows what it takes to do a movie. He can actually complete a movie. He can actually go through the grueling, and also they know basically the distribution game. So they would understand what our time frames. So it's all these different things which are it's probably, like I was joking with Eric, the director, it's like probably one of the biggest film school we've ever had in our life, because you can get a degree, but once you're out there in the field and in the world,
job training. Yeah, on the job
it's absolutely
training.
a whole different thing. But to answer your question, yes, it's a huge boom, even for everybody. I mean, you have no many how many people have basically. I was out in Las Vegas for the Formula One this past year. We were at where were we at? Geez, where's the hotel? Well, anyway, we were there at one of the hotels that were on the Strip, and we were clicking through the pay-per-view channels, and we were on the Prey was on there at one of the hotels, at basically one of the 8 movies that were on the click of the action adventure pipeline. And tons of people have said, "Hey, you're in Vegas." Yeah, because I mean, we actually accessed the whole, like, what is called what's it called, the entertainment, vacation. Oh, what's it called? It's called, like, the tourism, like, section of pay-per-view, hospitality. There you go, the hospitality pay-per-view circuit. So I mean, it gives us incredible legitimacy, because I mean, you're in Vegas, you're in the room. There are 8 movies shown, and one of those of yours out of the hundreds. I mean, I think in the next one, I think it was like, a Tom Hanks movie, and then it scrolled to ours. So it's like, it really puts us in really great company. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Exposure has been really great on that sense.
So your movie is called The Prey: Legend of Carnoctis. There was
Mhm.
another movie called The Prey that came out around the same time, right?
No, that one was called Prey Alone, which
Oh,
was
Prey.
a Hulu production. It was kind of like a reimagining of the of the Predator series, set in like Native America, and it was a Native American woman fighting the Predator, which I thought it
Right,
was
just
very
regular
interesting
Prey.
twist.
Did that cause a lot of confusion?
Actually, when I was talking to people, I said, "Oh, I saw your movie. Oh, I saw it the other day." And sometimes you want to say, "Yeah, it's cool," but most of the time you have to correct and no, that's another movie. Ours is The Prey: Legend of Carnoctis. So I mean, like, 2 different type of stories, but as long as they basically, like, have an idea, like, what you're doing, it's always good.
Yeah. So you have this movie. You're working on some other stuff.
Mhm.
Why, even before you started, knowing, well, before you started, know not kind of knowing what the journey is going to be, and now you're there. What's the difference between going to people and production companies and producing films for them that might be able to get more mainstream or out there more? Obviously, you don't get paid as much. There's financially, there's more rewarding. A lot of people don't do it. You're betting on yourself, which is a huge bet. I I support that. I bet on myself every day. I just had the conversation today about betting on myself. But was there any conversation about that beforehand, and then even after, as you're working towards newer projects?
Well, again, having the movie being produced and being nationally distributed, and where people can see it, it has really opened us a lot of doors. Because, like I said, you're not somebody with an idea trying to get into the industry. You're already kind of in, even though you kind of pushed your own door. But people now see that you have a viable product. That, one, not only can you produce a movie, you can distribute it, but also the product is good. And that's one of the main problems right now, is that, like, a lot of independent film is not that entertaining. It's not that great. Either you get, like, the cookie cutter, like, small horror movies, or the kind of urban adventure, trying to score some drugs or get drunk at a party or whatever. To do the type of movie that we did, everybody said it was extremely ambitious, because it was a fantasy action movie. We had a creature, we had special effects, we had military, we had guns, we had all these type of things that small independents are just kind of too hard to get a hold of. So we just basically, like, shot for the moon, and we landed in orbit. But it does help us actually get us, like, meetings, and get up to people. And of course, and then, like, this is how basically we got into the relationship with Tubi, and now we're basically doing some stuff with Tubi. We're still kind of independently financing, but now we've seen how the model works, and now we can kind of a little bit guarantee a little bit more return to our investors, because now we see which are the niches and which are the real payouts of it. But again, I have much bigger projects. I mean, like, I have, like, a couple of big movies like Rattlers Creek or whatever. I think I mentioned to you, like, they're, like, in the 5-6 million range, and that needs a bigger production company, or more of a studio. But again, at the same time, we're still trying to, like, to knock into like, the bigger levels. And of course, that needs representation, or that needs a manager, or that needs just the right connection. Also, I'm basically producing this new TV show called Hooch, which is a female Breaking Bad during Prohibition. So it's a very interesting story. Again, we're trying to push it into the small production companies who have deals with networks like HBO, Cinemax, Netflix, Amazon. So again, it's like, it's a constant, basically, like, juggle of having 2 or 3 different projects that you're working on, plus another one that's ready to go into the cycle, and then other different, like, things that you always kind of find during the way. And because of that, I stumbled into this new organization that me and my lawyer Chumahan Bowen, we started, called the Native American Film Initiative, which is a treasure trove of great Native American stories that most people don't know about. And then we turned it into a nonprofit organization to start receiving donations to be able to produce some of these movies. And we're doing our first documentary right now. So we're really proud of those accomplishments. But yes, I mean, like, it does help very much so to have something out there.
But the goal is to some point to say, "Hey, Gus, we want you to write this movie, or we want to, we want you to."
Absolutely, absolutely. It's
Yeah,
always like we joke among friends in the industry that the golden phone call, when you see like, oh, hello, this is so and so for Paramount, or this is so so from Sony. We love what you were doing. Can you come in and talk about a project, or can you come in and pitch us some ideas? Or basically, you go to Amazon Prime and they say, listen, we're looking for a new crime idea for a TV show or whatever. So those are you're always kind of basically working towards that bigger goal, because at the end of the day, that's where the bigger distribution is. You get a wider net of recognition, but also like, it helps you more with your livelihood.
is there a certain amount of success, which obviously is subjective, that you need to have? Like if you have a big, one hit, two hits, is it a string of success? And what is the difference between trying to uh, pitch a movie and then also you're talking about TV shows? Way big difference, right?
Absolutely. Well, it's a very interesting thing because, for example, I have these acquaintances, not really friends, but they're acquaintances. I mean, Fede Alvarez and Rodolfo Sayagues, who did like, the new horror movie. They did like, this one called what was it, like, Cabin Fever? No, I don't think it was Cabin Fever, or one of these like small thing. And then he went on to do like, the girl with the girl with the dragon tattoo movies. So they did a couple of three movies and they become successful. He became established, and actually he's doing now, I think Fate is doing like the new Aliens reboot. So there's a certain point where two or three movies get you to the right production. Sometimes one movie can land you a great, for example, this guy that did the Star Wars movies. I mean, he did his first movie called Monsters, which was a movie he just shot completely independent. He did the CGI, and then that landed him the Godzilla gig, and then which landed him the basically the what's it called, like, Rogue One from Star Wars. So you can have one great movie. It always just depends who sees your content. If you basically been doing a lot of great stuff, and then a studio executive or manager or an agent sees your stuff and your fifth film, and he notices you, you did 5 films to get there. If you see a guy that basically like, sees your first short in the film festival and he notices you, you got famous because out of the first film. So it really depends who catches your eye in the industry at what level. So I can't really say 1, 2, 3 movies. It's just basically who sees you at the right time.
But you guys are responsible for getting your, either it's a pilot or idea or even just something that's already shot out there into the film festivals, right? Which anyone can do. It's about deadlines and paying a fee and getting it in there. And you're responsible for getting it, in the hands of the right people. You did well enough with the Prey. Obviously, if you were looking back, was there something that you feel you maybe could have done a little bit differently that maybe would have either shortened the timeline or maybe helped it get some more eyeballs and the right eyeballs on it?
Well, actually, the really interesting thing is that there's nothing really much different we could have done. We certainly learned a couple of lessons. Like, for example, we should have saved some money for post-production so we can actually hire out the whole post-production, because it was a complete nightmare. Because I mean, Final Cut, Apple dropped Final Cut halfway through like the movie production. We had to switch to another editing suite, and that editing suite, basically some of the files got corrupted, blah blah blah, all these different type of situations. So maybe saving some money for post-production and like, and the final thing, that would have been a little bit, but there's nothing really much we could have done in the sense of short of being discovered by an agent or something like that, because nobody was going to fund our movie as nobodies. That's something we had to do it ourselves. So the only thing that we could have done is basically probably shorten the time of production to release. And then once we got in there, we went to AFM, we went to all these different like film markets, and you have no idea how many production companies are not legit. I'm not talking about the bigger guys,
Oh,
but
yeah.
some of the smaller distributors, they don't pay. We've heard horror stories. I tell you, once we kind of got the movie out there and went to AFM, I kid you not, man, we probably got between 50 to 70 emails from these small distributors, sales agents, all these different people who basically, oh, we worked with this movie, we did this, we did that. We started doing the research and we started peeling the layers of the onions, and most of these people didn't pay. We had this one horror story from this one a movie producer who actually had a phone call with a reputable company that actually still exhibits and has a stand at AFM, in which the guy basically, the movie was out there, they got international sales, the guy was on vacation in Mexico, saw the movie in the hotel in Mexico, and he hadn't been paid in 8 months. The guy had to a heated conversation with the distributor. And you know what the distributor said? Okay, dude, sue me.
Yeah.
Run. I mean, like, that's the level of crassness that they have, So we basically figure, okay, do we take a gamble with these guys and kind of leave our investors hanging, or do we wait a couple more years, try to find the right place to at least control the money? And that's what we did. And again, I mean, there's hundreds of stories that even like, Peter Jackson got stiffed 6 to 10 million from New Line Cinema. So like, you can't sometimes never win. So
Yeah, it's tough. Well, let's talk about the projects that you're working on. You have a movie that you're pitching and a TV show.
mhm.
Give us a quick 30 seconds on each, and see if we can't find some people who might be interested.
Well, very cool. Well, the first one is a very, very fun story. It's action sci-fi. It's called Rattler's Creek, and it's basically Wild Bill Hickok, Calamity Jane, and Jesse James land through interesting circumstances at the beginning of the movie into this haunted old town, which is basically overrun by Indian spirits. So they have to basically uncover the curse, uncover the whole thing, survive the night, and try to find like the magic helper to help basically like release the curse and have them to be able to basically, because they're geo-fenced by this curse, they can't get out of the town without being killed. So they have to find the origin of the spirits, save the souls, and be able to come out of it like so it's kind of like a Western fantasy with a lot of fun action. It's kind of like very much like in the vein of Wild Wild West, but with a little bit more of a fun twist.
And what stage are you at? You have actors, or you have a
Right now,
script?
we're basically in a little bit of pre-production. We're not talking to different production companies because we were talking basically engaging with Josh Jamel to become Wild Bill. We had a couple of other contacts that we had to reaching out, but right now it's still like in the initial phases because, like I said, it's a movie that's probably in the budget of 5 to 10 million. So we're kind of like seeing which production companies we can partner with to take us to the next level. And the thing about it is that right now, you can reach out to the agents of these actors, but they want to see a guarantee money in deposit before they get a commitment. So you always have to have like at least 500,000 to $1 million to be able to lock in these actors. But if you don't have a larger production company behind you with already a scheduled release, basically agreement with a big studio, it's very hard to find that kind of money. So we're kind of right now seeing like who's the right people to get in there. We're also talking to a couple of different like agents and managers who, because also there's a really great way also to get through this also because a lot of actors have their own production companies, and sometimes they don't get fed the right type of scripts that they want because they're looking for something different, or the agent thinks like he might be able to get a better deal with this other actor who's more basically in vogue at the time. So we're kind of approaching some of these small production companies that are actor owned to get onto the project.
Is that like Sandler or Tyler Perry? That type of situation?
Well, those guys are a little bit bigger, but for example, there's a couple of small level like a medium actor like a Josh Duhamel or those guys that have some of their own production companies. So basically, our guys are still very famous, but they're not like Tom Cruise star level, but they're still recognizable names, and they're looking for great projects to kind of get involved with. So they become producer, they attach themselves into the project, and they're able to kind of push it forward. Because the biggest important thing is that a lot of people, I talk to a lot of producers, a lot of independent people, and a lot of people who are in the studio system, but I can't do anything because they're also, I don't know if you saw the movie Rush that was directed by the guy that was in Happy Days, Ron Howard. Okay, he came off Apollo 13 about these great movies, and he wanted to do this really interesting story about the Formula One race in the 70s.
Oh yeah.
Rush. He couldn't get financing.
Yeah.
He went to like 15 different studios and all said no. He had to get independent financing in Europe to get this movie done, which turned out to be an amazing, great movie. Basically with the guy basically that plays Thor, at the leading role. So you got to remember that everybody's chasing some sort of production. So I talked to all these different producers, and they're telling me that the level of scripts out there is abysmal. You have top tier scripts, medium level, low level, and then the rom-com horrors, which is all the glut that you see right now coming in on Netflix.
I've seen a few lately. I actually don't mind them. I think they're fun for what they are, but they're not going to be big.
Again, it's popcorn entertainment. But what I'm saying is that sometimes the threshold is so high to get the attention of an agent or a manager, but then at the same time, what they get produced is it's basically not that complicated storytelling. So when you try to approach these actors of production companies, if your story is interesting, if your story has a little bit of a bite or something, it always gets a little bit of their attention because, again, sometimes they're not being fed what they want or the primo stuff, you know.
My favorite Josh Duhamel movie is Win a Date with Tad Hamilton.
And that was a good one, yeah.
Great movie. Obviously,
Yeah,
he's been in some blockbusters, and
right.
the good thing about him is that he is very versatile. Right, he's been in some pretty big shows
Oh,
as well.
absolutely, absolutely. And here's the interesting thing: we weren't contacting him directly through his agent. We were trying to contact him through a back channel because the problem is that if you contact an actor through the agent thinks, okay, and this is not wrong. It's their livelihood. So say, okay, how am I going to get paid? Am I
Yeah.
going to tie him up with these guys who don't really have any financing, any backing, whatever? Or so I'm going to leave it open so when an Amazon movie comes around, they can give us our $1.5 million, you know?
Yeah.
So your stuff gets kind of laid away if you try to go through the normal channel. So we were
But
trying to go like through one of his, like, you know, his basically acquaintances that he had on the side, because that's sometimes how some of these great projects got run. I heard a really funny story a couple of weeks back on who's this actor? Wait a second. He actually was in Billions playing the Russian billionaire. Jesus Christ. Now he's bald, but I mean, Jesus. I have so many names in my head right now.
I'm
But
a
he was,
movie guy. I don't watch all these shows.
yeah,
My
well,
wife
anyway,
watches
the
all the
funny
shows.
thing is that, like, you know, he actually fired his management because they turned down a 1-day offer for 200 grand. Basically, it was a 1-day job. He'd come in, say a couple lines, 200,000, whatever, but it was very little for his manager or his agent. And he found out about it through a different thing. He said, listen, I'll get out a bid for 150 grand. That's my minimum, but I'll go and do it because it's still good money. And he gets to act and gets to do it. And some of these guys basically are like, you know, are months without, I mean, they're wealthy. They don't really need to be working every day, but they want to work. They want to have fun. They want to
Yeah,
basically.
there's no reason to do that. I think, you know, you look at that as in the sports world too, with agents and people having too many hands in the cookie jar and trying to figure out, well, that's not really a great deal for me. And I think it just, you know, it's not someone like a famous actor doesn't have the time to go, so they do need someone to manage
Absolutely.
it, but they
And it's
don't,
the
you know,
level of
they've got
protection.
management and agency, and
It's the
there's
level of protection. I mean, like when we were trying to basically hire Danny Trejo for our movie, again, we got him through a back channel, but we had to end up working with his agent, Miss Hinojosa. Like, you know, great Gloria. I mean, like, great person, but she was very, very tough. She was basically, okay, what is it about? Okay, this is how much I want. This is how much I need. Because again, they are the bad cop in the situation because they have to deal with the money. And you got to remember that every single producer that goes knocking on the door doesn't want to pay them the full rate. it's always a hassle. They can come in with $5 million, they still want to pay less. So these agents also, they're kind of like in a little bit of a boxing match when they go into these negotiations. So once we get to know her, and she's a really great person, great lady, a very talented manager, agent, and she actually works with a lot of Native American actors who we're probably going to be working in the future through NAFI. But the thing is that, like, you know, she had to play the back cop. But then when Trejo was on set, he was a joy to work with. Really cheerful, really great guy, really interesting. We showed him a couple of footage of the monsters when we were basically shooting. He didn't have any scenes with the monster because he was a secondary character. We showed him the monster. He says, "Oh, hey, look me up for number 2 because I really want to do this." He was really, like, you know, enthusiastic. But again, these managers, there's a reason why we're there. But sometimes the monetary motivation is not enough for them. And sadly, their clients are the ones that lose because they could probably be part of a great project, or they could be working, or at least get some pocket money. I mean, like, you know, hey, maybe, like, you know, this actor lost, maybe wanted to buy a Porsche Taycan, you know, didn't want to go into his savings. He could have done a day's work and had that car, you know, but the thing is that the agent didn't think it was valuable for him and his commission. So it's always like, you know, and that's why you see all these actors and big time directors and basically, like, you know, switching agents every 4 or 5 years because they become complacent. And you got to remember that it's not also these agents being malicious, is that they have 100 people that they have to feed work with only 4 or 5 jobs coming in. So who's the guy that first of all fits the role? Second, who's the guy that needs it most because hasn't been earning in a while? Who's the guy that has the bigger commission? All these things come into mind. So it's not me trying to vilify the managers or agents, but it's a little bit tough on their side. But they end up at the same time, they kind of create their own situations, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to be stuck. I say we're stuck doing a project and not be available for the next big thing that comes along. But there's plenty of actors out there and
Oh,
actresses who are
absolutely.
in a ton of things. They find a way to make it work if
Absolutely. And like I said, and if the project's good enough and it's interesting and the money is real, because that's another big problem. There's a lot of people showing up with nothing to basically, like, when we do some of these deals, we want to make sure they have a little bit in the bank to say, hey, listen, we are real, we are legit. The money's in escrow, nobody's touching it, so the investors don't have to worry, but the money is available. Because there's a lot of people that waste time. I was reading, years back, Kevin Costner was trying to produce Open Range, and he met with this Indian prince who was going to put like $3 million into the movie. He turned out to be a joker. So if Kevin Costner gets duped, imagine everybody else who's just a normal actors. And you got to remember, these people are just out there making a living too,
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about the show that you're doing, that you're working on also.
This show is something that I'm really proud of, because it's basically a very, very interesting story that probably happened a lot more than people understand. That it's basically the story of our fictional character, Rose Alexander, who's a World War I widow. She's living in Boston during the Great Depression. Basically, she loses her job. She's basically about to be evicted. There's nowhere to be found, anything to be done. But his brother, his half brother, is involved in these this shady gang, and of course they're bootlegging. So what happens is that he's a drunk. He's going to lose his job. He's a big of a mess, So he says, hey, listen, throw me a couple bucks. I'll go the rounds, do something with you, get me out of the way, and you won't lose your job. So the guy kind of accepts, And while they're doing the rounds, they find this abandoned still in the woods that nobody but his brother knows about. It's about this guy that basically ran away because of some sort of problem. He was a chemist, and he was doing moonshine in the woods. And they find him dead. Nobody knows about it. So Rose gets this crazy idea that, why don't we make our own product and start selling through the whole thing? So it comes this intertwined web of basically production. She learns how to distill. She has to be in the shadow, because of course, imagine being a woman in the 1930s doing prohibition. It's a big no-no. Women were in the kitchen, and that's about it. So imagine becoming a whiskey queen in a couple of years. So the project is called Hooch, which I think we're going to change it now to Whiskey Queen. And it's basically
Whiskey Queen,
female Breaking Bad meets Peaky Blinders,
Yeah. Well, Peaky Blinders, you'll catch the attention of Brent if he's still listening. It's one of his favorite shows ever.
We in the pitch deck, we throw in also Boardwalk Empire, because which was a really great show from HBO that also kind of shows the same type of label. It's the same type of time frame, But again, you got to remember that historically, the Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms Commission wasn't really called that. It was called the Alcohol Bureau. And there were people basically in there to basically agents, prohibies, what they were calling, to go in and bust in bars and people who do an illegal thing. Also, basically the famous word bootlegger doesn't come from a guy basically racing moonshine through the countryside. It was actually these guys on corners with these knee-high boots that had basically as a stash on the side of the boot. You came by, you gave them a dime, they took it out. They gave you the flask, you took a swig, and they put it back in, and you kept on walking.
I love it.
And that's what the name where bootleggers came from, because it was completely illegal. High-end people in government had access to alcohol. They had their own stashes, but the regular folks was incredible. So all these speakeasies started turning around. And the thing about it is that police couldn't talk or frisk or how can I say, or interrogate women. It was a social no-no. So the Bureau, for the first time, started hiring female agents. And in our story, we have historically the first female agent who becomes basically the nemesis of Rose and starts chasing her down. So we have these two powerful ladies in their own field who are also not respected in their own field, basically trying to get this little cat and mouse type of situation. So it turns into a very interesting thing, because first you have the first season is her kind of building the whole network in the system. Second is basically taking over the crime gang. But then third is basically when prohibition kind of ends, and then the big corporations start smashing into these smaller groups.
You have
then you get the government, and
you have to pitch multiple seasons.
Most of the time they want to have at least a general plot for at least 3 seasons. Right now, basically what they do is that they order a preliminary run of 8 episodes for the first season.
Right.
But when you do a pitch to a studio and to a network, yes, they need to have at least 3 seasons.
And one season is 13 episodes.
Usually that used to be the norm. And that was one of the big things that the writers were fighting, because now a season is 8 episodes now. Usually they do 10 or 12 if you're lucky. But if the studio doesn't want to take too much of a risk, they kind of limit you at 8.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
8
that's
is
a
kind
big
of like the new
difference
normal now.
because you have a storyline that you have to cut into 8 episodes as opposed to 13. It's one of the reasons why I'm a movie guy, as I mentioned. My wife watches shows. As a viewer, are you more of a movie guy or a show person? As a viewer,
Actually, I've always been more of a movie guy, but the better quality of product is on TV right now.
yeah,
No doubt
I
about it.
agree with that. Probably.
No doubt about it.
I
So,
don't have time to
and
sit through it because I need to concentrate. Like people can just have it in the background and casually watch. I'll literally rewind
no,
a
some of
hundred
these
times.
shows you really have to pay attention. I mean, I just finished watching the new True Detective on HBO.
Heard good
It was
things.
it was an interesting season. Probably not the best one that they had, but Jodie Foster is always a marvelous actor, and it was a very very interesting setting because it's set in Alaska around the Arctic Circle. So it's very interesting to see how people live in those.
Probably a lot of Native Americans in that too, right?
Oh,
Because
absolutely. Yes. No, they have the Inuit tribes and all the stuff. It's very interesting. I would definitely recommend it. But yeah,
yeah,
right now the best stuff that I see out there is on television. And actually, Amazon, their movies weren't that great, but they're actually getting better and better. I think the new Roadhouse movie is coming out, which I'm pretty excited about on Amazon. With Jake Gyllenhaal, seems to be like a really fun remake, and actually they have the Conor McGregor also as a bouncer or a tough guy in it. So the
that's
trailer seems very
such
interesting.
a cult classic, Roadhouse. They're talking about remaking Ferris Bueller, and I feel like I think I don't know, maybe
Some things you can remake. I mean, one of my all-time favorite movies that actually kind of got it started me into the whole path of writing movies was, I don't know if you remember, Big Trouble in Little China.
yeah.
That was one of my first movies that I saw as a kid. I said, whoa, you can have action and fantasy in the same movie. That kind of blew my mind. So that kind of opened me to all the different possibilities. And then I heard they were going to do a remake with The Rock. And I said, yeah, he might be one of the biggest stars around, but I don't know. So they're always trying to cash in. And sometimes they are very well done. Some remakes are done very well. But again, it's kind of hit and miss, you know?
You ever see Walking Tall with The Rock? I think The Rock is a very good actor.
Oh, Buford T. Pusser.
Yeah.
That actually was a really great
I really
role
like
for
that
him because
movie.
I think it's one of his first roles that when he started out doing
Yeah.
movies, and I think it was perfect because he was coming from the wrestling world, and this guy was a bruiser slash enforcer police guy, you know, so it kind of fit, you know.
Yeah, but the story was. I mean, sometimes you need the story too. It doesn't matter how good the actor
Oh
is.
yes. Oh
Uh,
no, no. It
TV
always ends and starts with the page. It's like, you know, this famous producer. Oh Jesus, what's his name? He ran Paramount and what was his name? Well, I'm sorry, I'm really bad with names today. I've been doing so many phone calls earlier. But he said if it's not on the page, it's not going to be on the screen. So, and he actually was the few guys executives at Paramount. I mean, he produced Rosemary's Baby. He produced The Godfather. He produced Chinatown. Uh, Bob Evans. There you go, Robert Evans. So, and he was one of the few executives who actually read the scripts, which is something that doesn't really happen right now at the studio level. It's just basically junior executives and junior producers actually reading the scripts, and they basically have these meetings. Okay, what's going on? This. Okay, these are the bullet points. Oh yeah, that sounds like a good movie. Go for it. This guy actually was sending notes back as a studio head to the writers to say, hey, this is a little bit weak, this is a little bit strong. I really like this, but we can. So they were actually really basically in love with storytelling, which at the end of the day, it's what really concentrates on some stuff, like, you know. So I mean, and the stuff that's coming out internationally right now, it's really great. There's a lot of great stuff coming out of Spain. There's a lot of great stuff coming out of Korea. I'm just actually watching this new Japanese show on Netflix called House of Ninjas, which is a very interesting story. Yeah. So I mean, like, you know, it's very interesting, and it's all. And here's the funny thing: people say, "Oh, you can't put subtitles." People think that Americans are uncultured, or they can read, they can understand, and if the story's interesting enough, they'll make the effort.
There's people who want subtitles even when it's in English. Just they like to
Exactly.
have the
Funny
subtitles.
thing, I was over the holidays with my nephews. I mean, they were like 14 and 15. And I said, Tito, why don't you put the subtitles? Everybody put subtitles. And I said, what, you want captions? Because again, sometimes people talk too fast or they don't understand
That's
what
what I
they're
meant.
saying.
The captions.
And they want to get, especially with English shows.
But sometimes you could tell it's so that there's like a delay, and it kind of is weird. I remember watching what was the show with the thieves that they were robbing. Now I'm
A
forgetting.
lot of them.
It was like international show, and they were robbing a bank, and
Oh,
they took the hostages, and
yeah, I think it's a Spanish production. I think it was
right,
called House of Money or
yeah,
Casa de Papel or something. I
right.
mean,
It
money
was
something.
so dubbed and it was so off that when I first started watching, I was like, I don't know if I could do this, but I stuck through it, and it didn't bother you as much.
Money Heist. That's what it's called in
Yeah,
English.
that's it. Money Heist, very good. I didn't watch
No, no,
the
it's a
whole thing
really
of it,
great
but
Spanish
it was a
production.
good
Me being
production.
and me being a native Spanish speaker, sometimes you don't get some of the stuff because they're talking, they're muffling, or they're doing
Yeah.
whatever, like So sometimes it's even hard for us like native speakers to kind of get some of the stuff. So subtitles are really, but yeah, there's a lot of great stuff out there. So yeah, going back to your question, yeah, I think the best stuff out there right now is on television.
Well, give me a couple shows that you said House of Ninjas. Give me a couple of your all-time favorite shows and your all-time favorite movies.
Well, all-time
Say
favorite
two
movie.
or three is fine.
My all-time favorite movies, of course, going back a long time, was Lawrence of Arabia, which is one of the first movies that really made me fall in love with production, big landscapes, big vistas. I mean, it's an incredible movie. I would recommend anybody who really is a fan of cinema to go back and watch Lawrence of Arabia with Peter O'Toole, and you will actually see how interesting, how politically well the stories told also of the revolution during World War I of the Arabic Peninsula and how it became to be because the English completely divided the places to become these little oil territories. Then, of course, The Usual Suspects, which was Kevin Spacey's first movie. That's the first movie that I came out of the theater saying, wow, what a twist. So that was another great movie. But I mean, there's so many to kind of
Usual Suspects in my top 10, I think. My favorite movie of
absolutely,
all time.
absolutely. And it's one of these smaller movies that right now, I don't even know if it would even be made. Probably it would be like, if the guy was lucky enough to have representation, he would probably go to a streamer
That's
and
some
he
good
would be like
actors, right?
Netflix.
Pollock and well now what's his name does his own production. Benicio del Toro.
Yeah, Benicio del Toro was in it. This guy,
Kevin Pollock was in it.
something Byrne. I mean, there was this comedian, which I don't know.
Kevin Pollock.
Kevin Pollock was in it. So it was a great cast, but they were up and comings back then. And like I said, it was the very first big roles that Kevin Spacey did and kind of elevated him as a really top level actor. But it's one of these movies that are one of these treasure troves. And then of course you go back to to the great movies of the 60s and 70s, basically The French Connection, Day of the Condor. I mean, so many other great stuff. And recently, this past year, a movie that I really enjoyed was Saltburn, which I actually saw.
I haven't watched it yet, but it's on the list.
It's very weird. It's very quirky. It's not for everybody. And I think it's more of an actor's movie than a movie that you want to watch and enjoy because it's a little bit disturbing. But it's very good. I watched Napoleon from Ridley Scott, which I'm a huge fan of historical movies. I really did enjoy that one. Killers of the Flower Moon was very interesting because
3 hours or something like that.
Yeah, that's another trend which I think they're going a little bit overboard. I think 2 hours, 2 hours,
2.5, maybe
more than enough to tell the story.
Yeah, I agree. Few Good Men is my favorite of all time. Then I got
Field of Dreams,
Field of Dreams, Hoosiers, Good Will Hunting, and Ferris Bueller. That's my top 5.
Wow, good selection, man. I like that. Good Will Hunting is a great movie. Also, yeah, like I said, and I think we start basically going. That's another big problem with films and in cinema culture is that you go back every year before 2010, 2011, and there are at least 5 to 6 great movies every single year.
Yeah, that people didn't even know about. They didn't watch in the theaters, but now the cult classics like an Office Space, where years later it just becomes huge.
Well, here's the interesting thing also is that Tubi has all these smaller movies. So for example, if you want to see the president, if you want to see Clear and Present Danger, some of this stuff is not available on the streamers because of the different, but most of them are on Tubi. So you can watch all these really great 90s and 2000 movies now on these AVOD platforms because again, there's nobody housing this great stuff. And like I said, prior to 2011, I mean, every single year there were 5 or 6 great movies. We can go back to 2001 and say, oh, this movie and this movie. Oh yeah, I remember that movie and that movie and that movie. So you go back and you see there's so many good stuff that's out there. But going back to this year, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff. Also, you're watching a lot of stuff at your house now because now everything's almost available. So I usually go with my friends once a month to the theater because we want to watch stuff on the big screen and enjoy some of the stuff. But I'm really excited about the new Dune movie that's actually out this weekend. So
yeah, I'm not as much into that. type
Science
of
fiction,
movies,
yeah.
but I do. I probably will watch that. There's a new Ghostbusters coming out. I'll probably
Yes. The
probably
first
watch
Ghostbuster
that.
that came out last year was very interesting. Also, I think they did very good. You see, those were the times when a reboot actually works. You know, they pay
A
homage to the
reboot better than a
origin.
remix. A reboot, like the different twist on the
You're absolutely
story.
right. It's a. I think it's more like a reimagining of the story or a continuation, if you like, better.
Right,
I
a
think it's a
prequel
continuation
or a
because it
sequel.
follows the story, but it honors the story. It brings back old favorites for the fans. So I think it did a lot of stuff very well.
This past week or so, I watched two horror films. Thanksgiving, which was a little, it was really over the top and outrageous, and then
Oh yeah, yeah, I heard of it.
Five Nights at Freddy's, which these aren't good. They're in the genre of like a Scream or a Saw, where they're supposed to be kind of scary or freaky, but they kind of make fun of themselves in the way that it's done. I like that kind of horror
Well,
movie.
it's the new style of mock horror, what they call it right now,
Yeah,
in which basically it's a slasher. It's very graphic, but you have like little low points in it. They kind of bring down the tone because also that's a big problem. Is that a lot of people also the horror genre has been completely stretched to the max and every single level, and now straight horror is starting to get boring too. And I remember, like in a couple years back, they would come out with this term, which I totally hate, but I mean, after describes what they call it, these horror movies were called torture porn, in which basically you see the saws, you saw what's it called, like Jigsaw, how all these different type of things, and it was just basically seeing people suffering. Of course, the situation was is that how these people get into it and how do you get out of it. But instead of slashing, they had to do these really elaborate torture situations because nobody got emotional or scared of somebody being cut open or being
right.
stabbed. So, and now they're reverting to, okay, you know what, we got to tone it down, which is just too crazy. So they're going to the more humor side of horror. So
I enjoy that type. When I was in college, I thought what I want to do is I want to do marketing and promotion for trailers, movie previews, and it's at the point now where I won't watch previews because they give away way too much of the storyline / funny parts in a comedy. I was like, if you have a movie with Jennifer Aniston or Brad Pitt or like you don't really have to promote this movie. People are going to go see it, so why give away all of this in the
here's
preview?
here's the interesting thing. Even though if you have those huge stars, you still have to promote it because the problem is that you have YouTube, which is taking away a lot of assets. You have probably the sports season. Maybe there's the basketball playoffs, football, this and that. MLS is getting very popular now. You have video games. You have basically
How
the
do you
streamers.
promote it without showing too much of the
Well,
of
you
the
see,
plot?
that's the hidden art. That's the hidden art of a good trailer. And the funny thing is that I think let me show you something really quickly. We got nominated a year back to one of the things called the Golden Trailers, and our movie was kind of like one of the ones that basically that was kind of got you we were nominated. We didn't win, but it's one of these movies that that got you interested without having to tell too much of the plot.
Yeah, I love
And we
that.
kind of got ourselves in there because it's an art to do a trailer. There's actually, and it was interesting because look at this book. This is a magazine of the association. I mean, it's like huge stuff basically, and all of these are industry houses. Look at this company right here. It's a complete house with 40, 50 technical people that just do trailers, and they work for big studios and stuff like that. So it's a whole industry onto itself. So you're absolutely right. It's a fine line, but the problem is that and right now you have to show the money shot. You have to show the monster. You have to
Yeah.
show this. You have to show that. Otherwise, it will not grab the attention. Audiences are completely spoiled when it comes to choices right now. So it's very hard. But
Yeah,
you're right. Yeah, sometimes they give away the whole movie, but sometimes they have to.
yeah, there are a lot of choices. Do you have? I mean, if you could pick where this would house, do you have it in mind of this is the stream I want on, this is the big movie production company that I would want? You don't have to say it in case it's obviously you would want whoever will do it to make it right. But do you have in your mind say, hey, all things being equal, if I had my choice, here's where I'd want this movie to go to, or here's where I'd want this show to be?
Well, the movie is very interesting because since it's not a huge budget, a lot of streamers can take care of it. We can probably go to Netflix. We can probably go to Amazon. We can go to Paramount TV. We
Would
can
it
go to.
matter? I mean, let's say even all the money is equal. Does it matter to you where it goes? Do you have a preference? Is there something like, hey, if I'm on Netflix, it might just be looked upon as better and more successful than if I'm on Peacock or Hulu.
Very interesting. You know what? A couple of years back, there was definitely a hierarchy. If you were basically, if your movie was involved in Paramount, if it was involved at Sony, if it was at Warner Brothers, it was that was a whole different level because that was the movie industry. But now, Paramount, Apple TV, Amazon are just as big and prestigious, and they have basically some of them already have won some awards. So now it just basically it's who you find the right team who can understand and get your creation done. Because also one of the big problems that, for example, Netflix, I have a lot of people are telling me that basically to stay away from Netflix because they're absolutely data driven. If your movie or show does not perform right away in the first episode, they can cancel it. And that's something that's a little bit of detriment in the sense that, like, for example, if Seinfeld came on right now on Netflix, it would have been canceled the first month because I remember that Seinfeld took a year for it to kind of really grow up and get into it. And the funny thing is that I got into Seinfeld kind of late. And during the pandemic, I said, you know what? I'm going to go back and watch the first two seasons of Seinfeld that I didn't watch it. The first two shows, whoa, they dragged. They were not funny. So the interesting thing is that, like, so a lot of people are staying away from Netflix because it's just their culture. They're not good or bad. It's just basically if you don't have a certain amount of numbers, we can't go for it. And there's a lot of shows that had a lot of great potential, but they just didn't stay with it. So a lot of people are preferring to go to some place else more than Netflix. But if Netflix come to us, hey.
Yeah, of course. Seinfeld, my favorite show of all time. I don't even think it's close to, and there's a lot of great shows that I like.
It got way better after season 3. It started really expanding into the whole world, and that's what made it so great.
There's we had them on the show. It's called This Podcast is Making Me Thirsty. And it's a podcast all about Seinfeld. I'll send you the link. You'll love it.
Interesting.
It's a really good.
There's so many great
really
niches in the podcast world. It's amazing.
Yeah. But I want to ask you about, because there was a funny episode. It was sort of like a storyline where Kramer goes out to California and he's trying to get a screenplay written, and he sees Fred Savage in a store and like hands it to him. Is that real life? I mean, do you have
actually, you know what? I had this really funny story about the screenwriter I was talking to, and we're talking about basically basically how to get stuff to people, whatever. And actually, this writer, he actually wrote. Remember the movie Black Rain with Michael Douglas?
Yeah.
Okay, he was one of the writers on that show, and he was having lunch with his actor. The guy, he played Hellboy. He was in Sons of Anarchy. The older gentleman. I mean, he was also a Beauty and the Beast. Ron Perlman. There you go. He was having lunch with Ron Perlman,
yeah.
And this one guy was in the restaurant. They saw him and said, "Hey, Mr. Perlman, huge fan. Listen, I don't want to bother you, but here, I have this really great script. I would love if you can read it." And he puts it on the table. He goes, "Okay, well, thank you very much, blah, blah, blah." And they left. And the writer goes in and says, "Are you going to read this or throw it away?" And he goes, "Nah, I'll probably read it."
You might as well. It might be the next
they
best
are looking for material. They are kind of like, curious because they don't know where this gym is going to land. And that's happening a lot with, like I said, with the agents and managers. They are gatekeepers of all this property. So, for example, it happens a lot with female actresses. Like, when we're trying to work with Hooch, the thing about TV is that for you to get any type of meeting or any type of recognition, you have to work with some sort of showrunner or a big showrunner who's done some other shows. But at the same time, you have to be attached with some sort of production company. So we are approaching actresses between 30 and 40 years of range or more even, who have their own production company, and we're sending them the pilot script because, again, they don't get fed the scripts that they really want. They just get fed what the agent wants them to see.
Right.
Like I said, maybe there's a really great show, but you know what? I'm going to send this to Emily Blunt instead of selling it to Dakota Johnson because I think Emily Blunt could give me more money, or she really needs something different and she's looking for this genre, So
give me actor and actress for your movie and for your show, regardless of what it would cost. You could have anyone you want to play in the movie, to play in the show. Give me a name.
Well, in Rattler's Creek, basically, I would love. Oh, Jesus Christ! Who's this guy? Because he's really great at drama, but he's also great at comedy. He actually was in the recent Dungeons and Dragons movie. He played Captain Kirk in the recent Star Trek movies. I think Chris something. It's not Chris Pratt. It's Chris Pine. I will love Chris Pine to play a younger Wild Bill Hickok because he has the mannerism. He has the swagger, and he can kind of play awkward and serious at the same time. For Calamity Jane, there's so many great actors. I mean, you have Alexander Daddario. You have Emily Scodelario. So many great actresses. For a hooch, there's a lot of great actresses that basically are in that age range of like late 30s, early 40s who can really play this dramatic role. But when it comes to TV, it's not really a certain person that you want. It's just
Yeah.
basically basically you kind of look, because I'm looking for the Midwestern type of look, basically not a typical blonde, but more like a brunette from the Midwest, or a person that's kind of probably came from the country to Boston because she got married, more like, the all American type of look, and
Yeah.
a person who doesn't look very sinister, very somebody who's like almost like the girl next door, but turns into this really crude, whiskey peddler, So there really isn't I believe I had a list of a wish list, but again, it interchanges. And also the big problem is that when you're chasing the production companies, this person is hot. So they always go for these top five, but then basically 5 months later, that
Yeah,
changes.
that
Then they
could
go with
change.
these other ones.
Sure.
So it's just you can't really put yourself as long as the person is a good actor, I think anybody can get into these roles,
I agree. I'm excited to hopefully see them. Are these 2024, or is it going to be probably more than likely 25?
Right now, we're talking to a couple of people here and there. We're trying to get it out there more because we haven't landed on the right production company for both of them. But we're kind of shopping stuff around. And in the meantime, I'm kind of being entertained myself with my smaller low production Tubi movies. We're doing a slasher urban type of movie right now. It's going to go directly to Tubi called Gatekeeper. And then I have this documentary that I really started going a little bit into the documentary world with this new nonprofit that I started with my partner Chuma Hambo, and called the Native American Film Initiative, in which we're telling all these really great Native American stories. For example, very few people know about this Native American who actually was a real John Wick during World War II, called Ernest Childers. He was the first Native American to win the Medal of Honor for his actions in World War II, and he single-handedly took out 2 German machine gun nests, a sniper, and a mortar nest on one that's hit on one of these assaults. And it's called a Red Eagle because that's what he was called. He was also called Chief, because one of the interesting things about World War II is that actually Native Americans, aside from African American soldiers, they weren't segregated. So they actually in the same type of division and platoons with white soldiers. So either they would call him either Red Eagle or Chief, as a nickname. But actually he was able to kind of break down the defenses on the small hill town of Oliveto, and that actually would enable them to kind of move forward and start gain more terrain. And that's how he got the Medal of Honor. So we're doing this documentary right now, and we're talking with we actually just engaged a award-winning military history professor to be one of the experts in the documentary. And I'm also working with this Native American studies professor who's also part of the Lakota tribe. And he's going to be telling us a little bit of the story. Because what happens, and what most people don't understand, is that after the Native Americans were forcefully removed from the lands and moved into the Midwest, they were forced into these boarding schools where they were kind of assimilated. And there was this one credo says, kill the Indian, save the man. They wanted to basically take away their Indian culture and Christianize them. So all these people got into these boarding schools, agricultural schools, military academies, and then most of them ended up joining the National Guard. And then that's how these people got into World War II, because the 45th Infantry Division, most people don't know, but it was basically 20% Native Americans,
These are all. I mean, there's so many interesting stories that haven't been told yet.
Absolutely.
It's and I'm looking forward to hopefully you getting some of these out there. I did want to, before we go, I did want to ask you just to talk about your watches, which is really interesting. Just give us a quick plug and info on the watches.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, it's a small micro brand that I saw called Science Technique. And basically, we did a small run of, actually, if you give me a second, let me get one right now.
Sure.
There you go. So basically, it's a skeleton, basically automatic movement. Very in vogue. It looks very much like an AP or an Lanchonson or a Glashuta, and it's a very limited production. We actually did only 50 of these, and they were sold out. So that's something that I did as more of a hobby, and I kind of and I save a couple of them because sometimes when I have meetings And I talk to producers. Sometimes I give them like little gifts for helping me out for these small stuff, whatever. And
Will you
actually,
do
I'll
another run?
send you one your way. So you have to send me your address anyway. But again, it's a little small passion project because I always love designing. I've always loved mechanical watches. I've always loved basically getting stuff out there. So maybe at the end of the year, I might do another run of another original design. But right now, I have my plate so full with all
Yeah,
these little small projects that
I
like,
have I have a guy who does licensed watches, and he might be a person for you to talk to if you ever get back into that.
great. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And also, and if he needs any help, I'm very much like, plugged into like, Swiss factories and also Asian factories. Because the interesting thing is that a lot of people don't know that Tudor, basically some smaller brands that are Swiss, 60% of their components are made in Asia. The bracelets, some of the cases, because all you have to do is make sure that the quality is there and the production cycles are good and they resist a certain. But so it's like one of the little dirty secrets of Swiss-made watches, because again, after the Apple Watch came around, it absolutely collapsed the mid-range market. Everything under $2,000 is basically got into and then now there's been a resurgence, especially after the pandemic, where people have a little extra money. They start treating themselves more. Watch prices soared. I mean, Rolex prices went through the roof. Luxury goods went through the roof. So there's been a little bit of a resurgence, in watch production again. But yeah, absolutely. I got whoever you want to contact. And also the same thing goes for me, Matt. If you have anybody that needs some sort of help, in the entertainment world, basically a little bit of advice or what was my experience or whatever, more than happy to help out.
Perfect. I'm waiting to hear back from some people who might be able to grab a call with you and discuss the projects that you're working
Sure, yeah.
on.
Like I said,
Hopefully
I'm always
that'll
looking
come
for
to.
to new partnerships. And again, at the end of the day, if nothing happens, it's always somebody, because also we always joke that the movie industry is about 20% contact, 80% connections. I mean,
Yeah,
at 20% talent, 80% connections. Because at the end of the day, people want to work with people they get along with, because making a movie is a year to 2 year process.
yeah, it's
Making
a
a film.
long process.
So you got to make sure you get along with these people, because I mean, you're going to be meeting with them every single day. There's going to be discussions. There's going to be creative differences. There's going to be I mean, I had tons of discussions with Eric, about this, about that, but at the end of the day, you have to have that respect and friendship to kind of keep going at it, because otherwise, I mean, I've heard tons of stories of productions and producers who basically fought and never got the movie out to
Yeah,
release
you could be
because,
3/4 of the way through, and then it could just be dead.
and they were
Dead.
fighting over money, fighting over this, fighting over
Sure,
that,
sure.
their contact, whatever. So half of the stuff. So everybody even tells me I just won just by having the movie finished, and then I became part of the ratified heir of people who have the movie distributed, which is
Yeah,
another huge thing, because
it
there's
is. It's a huge
thousands of
accomplishment.
movies that are great movies that are sitting on shelves that
Huge
nobody has seen.
accomplishment. Yeah, and looking forward to what's next. We're going to let you out of the Wolff Den with the same question everybody gets. You
Okay.
can spend 24 hours with anybody in the world, but they have to be alive and you can't be related to them. Who would you choose and what would you guys do?
I would probably. Wow, that's a really, really interesting question. If it was industry wise, I would like to basically be golfing one day with Sylvester Stallone, because this is a guy that I have admired his career for such a long time. He came from humble beginnings. He worked his way through. He has been a smart
Did you watch
entertainer.
his documentary?
Oh, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And it's one of the few guys that basically that has remained humble. I know people who know him, and basically and he just came up with this catchphrase during the pandemic, which I love. He says, keep punching. I mean, you still have to be out there. And one of the greatest things that he said that I always kept with is when you get an opportunity, don't think about how you're going to do it. Just take it, because you don't know when it's going to come around again. And he said he lost a lot of opportunities for overthinking stuff. But this is a guy basically that has reinvented himself, has kind of changed around, revived older actors like him with the Expendable series. I mean, the guy is a creative whirlwind. So just basically have 3 or 4 hours to pick his brain to hang out with him would be a huge honor. And
Yeah,
then
I like Over the Top was a favorite of mine.
oh my God, that was a great. I actually saw that when I was a kid in South America, because I remember that back then we didn't even have a movie theater in the town because it wasn't rentable. So all these video stores used to pop up. So closer to the weekend, you had to get early to get the videotapes before somebody else rented it out. And I remember that new Stallone. The funny thing is that in the 80s, Stallone was king. Stallone and Schwarzenegger were the kings. There was no way around it, you know. So this new Stallone movie came out, and we basically rushed Friday night after school to the store, grab a copy, and watch it. And I thought it was savage. I also loved Cobra. People think it's a horrible movie, but maybe because I saw it when I was young or whatever, but I thought it was such an interesting detective movie, you know. So he did all these really interesting things. So
yeah, he's a great actor. Seems like a great person. I saw some reality show with his daughters are dating. I can't watch that stuff, but good on him.
Yeah, actually, I started watching them because I was a little bit curious to see what their day life is. But it's too much goofing around. It's too much like, you know, fluff for the camera, you know. Because you gotta remember, you gotta come up with content for a whole hour. So I mean, I don't want to watch these girls go learn personal training because they're living alone in New York. I mean, I want to be like, you know, how Stallone gets into a meeting, talks about the script, talks about the financing, that's the stuff they don't want to show.
I agree with that. Well, looking forward to seeing everything come to fruition.
Thank you so much, Matt, for taking the time. Love chatting with you. You're always very interesting, always very knowledgeable, and always have, like, you know, a huge network of people that basically follow you and, like, you know, respect you and kind of, like, you know, appreciate what you bring to the table. So
I appreciate it. It was, again, as I said, one of the few highlights to come out of Sopranos Con. Cinematic Rex. That's Cinematic Rex. If you want to connect with him, check out
my Yahoo is Cinematic Rex at Yahoo. My company is Cinematic Rex. I'm also on Instagram as Cinematic Rex. Yeah. So yeah, feel free to reach out.
Check out nafi-films.org.
Yeah, exactly. That's my new nonprofit. We're having
watch The Prey, not Prey, with Trejo on Tubi.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Great to chat with you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.